The girls today don't know that flour once came in cotton printed with flowers. They don't know what you'll use when there's nothing else to use. I turned the Pillsbury sack inside out under the lamplight, hiding the logo against my son's skin where no one but me would know it was there. My scissors made the only sound in the cabin. That and the wind testing the gaps in the chinking. 3 shirts laid out on the table, 3 children asleep in the loft. 14 weeks since I'd spoken to anyone but them. The lamp oil was running low. I'd have to buy more soon. Which meant facing town. Which meant Mrs. Henderson's eyes traveling over my collar like she was pricing meat at market. I could endure the looking. What I couldn't endure was the softness in people's voices afterward. That terrible gentleness that told me I'd become the kind of woman others pitied. My hands moved automatically. Cut, fold, pin. These hands had done harder work. They'd helped birth calves in freezing rain, hauled water when the well ran dry, held my husband's head while he coughed blood into a rag I'd later have to burn. They'd kneaded bread and scrubbed floors and signed papers at the bank that made my stomach turn to ice. I didn't let myself think about those papers often. The debt, the failed wheat crop, the land my husband had loved more than he'd loved breathing easy. Loved so much he'd worked himself into an early grave trying to make it produce. The youngest shirt was nearly done. I held it up to the light, checking the seams. Tight, even stitches. No one could say I didn't know how to sew. No one could say my children weren't clean, weren't fed, weren't raised to mind their manners and keep their heads high even when their clothes came from flour sacks. Outside, the wind shifted. I could smell snow coming. That peculiar metallic scent that meant winter was done being polite. First snow would empty the mercantile shelves as everyone stocked up for being snowed in. I'd have to go before then. Had to. I set down the finished shirt and looked at my hands in the lamplight. Rope burned, cracked along the knuckles. Red from lye soap and cold water. Old hands, though I was only 28. How long can I make myself invisible before winter drags me into the light? I folded the shirt carefully, smoothing the flour sack cotton flat. In the loft, one of my children murmured in sleep. The sound pulled at something in my chest, that old fierce thing that had kept me standing when I wanted to lie down and let the prairie take me. 14 weeks since I'd had to explain myself to anyone. 14 weeks since someone had looked at me and seen anything other than the widow Thompson, the one who couldn't make the land pay, couldn't keep her husband alive, couldn't do anything but survive. I turned down the lamp and sat in the dark, listening to my children breathe. Tomorrow, maybe, or the day after, soon, I'd have to face the world again. But tonight, I could still be invisible. The wagon seat was frozen solid beneath my skirts. I'd told the children to sit still and stay quiet, and they did, too well trained in not drawing attention, in making themselves small. That broke my heart worse than anything. Town looked the same as it had 3 months ago. Same false front buildings, same muddy street frozen into ruts. Same mercantile window with its displays of goods I couldn't afford. I tied the horses outside and took a breath that hurt going down. Remember, I told my daughter, 8 years old with my eyes and her father's stubborn chin. We buy what's on the list. We don't ask for anything else. She nodded. They all did. My good, quiet children who'd learned not to want. The bell above the mercantile door rang when I pushed it open. Warm air hit my face, wood smoke and coffee and leather, and 100 other smells that meant civilization, meant people, meant being seen. Mrs. Henderson stood by the bolts of fabric, her hands pausing mid-fold when she saw me. Her eyes went to my collar, my cuffs, the hem of my skirt where I'd let it down twice already and couldn't let it down again. I lifted my chin and walked to the counter. Jacob Brennan was there, measuring out nails for Mr. Peterson. He looked up when I approached. Just a glance, nothing that lingered. That's what I noticed first about him. He didn't stare. Didn't let his gaze crawl over me, cataloging damage. "Mrs. Thompson?" he said quietly. "Be with you in a moment." His voice had no pity in it. I hadn't known how much I needed that until I heard it. I waited while he finished with Mr. Peterson. My hands folded around my list. Cornmeal, salt, lamp oil, coffee if there was money left, though there wouldn't be. I'd counted it 3 times that morning. When Jacob turned to me, I noticed his hands. Work roughened like mine, scarred across the knuckles. Capable hands. He took my list without comment, moving through the store gathering items. "Cornmeal's gone up," he said, not apologizing for it, just stating fact. "Salt's the same." I nodded. Behind me, I heard Mrs. Henderson's skirts rustle, heard her whisper something to Mrs. York, heard my name, or thought I did. Blood rushed hot to my face, but I kept my eyes on Jacob's hands as he measured cornmeal into a paper sack. My son, 6 years old and serious as a judge, stood very still beside me, his gaze fixed on the jar of peppermint sticks on the counter. He didn't ask, didn't reach, just looked, with the terrible wanting of a child who's learned that wanting doesn't matter. Jacob saw it too. I watched him see it. "These sticks are damaged," he said, not looking at me, pulling one from the jar. "Cracked in shipping. Can't sell 'em. You boy'd be doing me a favor, taking one off my hands." The stick wasn't cracked. We both knew it. I should have refused. Should have said no charity, no handouts, no kindness that made me smaller than I already felt. But my son's face, the way light came into it. "Thank you," I said. The word stuck in my throat. Jacob just nodded and finished tallying my purchases. I counted out exact change, my fingers numb from more than cold. When he handed me the parcels, his hand brushed mine briefly. I saw him notice the rope burns, the cracked skin, the places where cold had bit deepest. He didn't flinch away, didn't comment, just held my gaze for a moment, steady, unflinching, and said, "Travel safe, Mrs. Thompson." Outside, the wind was knifing. My children climbed into the wagon without complaint, the peppermint stick already dissolving on my son's tongue. I unwrapped the reins and looked back once at the mercantile window. Jacob stood there, watching us leave, not with pity, with something else I couldn't name. All the way home, wind biting through my thin coat, I thought about that. He looked at my hands the way my husband used to, like they were proof of something worth noticing. 2 weeks later, after a blizzard that buried the fences and killed one of our chickens, I went back to town for thread. Just thread. I could make what we had last longer if I had thread to mend with. The mercantile was warm after the cutting cold outside. Jacob was alone this time, restocking shelves. He nodded when I entered, finished setting down a crate of canned goods, and came to the counter wiping his hands on his apron. "Mrs. Thompson." "Mr. Brennan, I need thread. Black, if you have it." He pulled out a wooden box, showed me the spools. I picked the cheapest, set it on the counter. "I have a problem," he said. I looked up sharply. His face was serious but not unkind. "Had a shipment come in before the blizzard," he continued, gesturing toward the back of the store. "Some fabric bolts got caught in the weather, water stained along the edges. Wrong colors for what folks around here want. They're just taking up space, but I can't sell damaged goods at full price." He walked to a stack near the window and pulled out a bolt of blue cotton, held it up to the light. There was no water stain. The color was perfect, sky blue, like spring water in a clear creek. My daughter would look like an angel in that color. "Damaged," Jacob said again, meeting my eyes. I understood then. This was theater. A performance we were both agreeing to act in so I could keep my dignity, and he could offer help without making me beg. "I could take them off your hands," I heard myself say, "if the price is right." "No charge." He set the bolt on the counter. "You'd be doing me a favor. Storage space isn't cheap." The fabric was soft under my fingers. Real cotton, not flour sacking. Not rough, not stained, not marked with logos or stitching I'd have to pick out by lamplight. I should have refused, should have walked away, Should have protected myself from whatever debt this kindness would create. But I thought of my daughter's face. Thought of teaching her that sometimes accepting help with grace was its own kind of strength. "I'll take them," I said. "Thank you, Mr. Brennan." His mouth quirked, almost a smile. "Jacob. Call me Jacob." "Martha," I said, and the word felt strange. My name. Not Mrs. Thompson, not the widow, just Martha. He wrapped the fabric in brown paper while I paid for the thread. When I left, the bundle felt heavier than it should have, weighted with something I didn't want to examine too closely. At home, I unwrapped it on my bed, ran my palm over the smooth surface, let myself imagine my daughter in a real dress, something that didn't announce poverty to everyone who looked. I didn't trust kindness anymore. Kindness always came with a bill you couldn't see until later. My husband had been kind when we married. Kind right up until the land fever took him and I became secondary to his dreams of wheat and property and leaving something behind. But maybe I could trust honesty dressed as kindness. Maybe I could trust a man who understood pride's architecture well enough to offer me damaged fabric that wasn't damaged at all. Outside, wind howled around the cabin corners. I folded the fabric carefully and put it in my trunk, under the quilts. For later, for when I was ready to imagine pretty things again. March brought mud and the smell of earth coming alive. I planted wheat with my children's help. All of us kneeling in the cold dirt pressing seeds into furrows. This harvest had to succeed. Had to. The numbers lived in my head like a prayer. Bushels per acre, price per bushel, debt owed to the bank. If the wheat failed, we lost everything. If it succeeded, we had a chance. I didn't let myself think past that, couldn't. Jacob's damaged goods appeared regularly now. Overstocked canned peaches, too much sugar ordered by mistake. Coffee that had sat too long and needed clearing out. Never mind that coffee didn't go bad sitting in a tin. Never mind that these were transparent fictions we both agreed to maintain. I accepted them, paid pennies when you let me pay anything at all, and went home feeling like I was walking a tightrope between gratitude and shame. But I'd also started noticing things. The way Jacob's house, small, neat, just behind the mercantile, only ever had one lamp burning in the evening. The way he ate alone, cooked alone, lived alone in a space that could have held a family. When had I started watching for his lamp at night? When had I started wondering who taught him to be kind without performing rescue? Late April. The wheat sprouted in neat green rows. I stood in the field at dusk, running my hands over the young plants, praying without words. My children played near the cabin, their voices carrying on the wind. Young, hopeful, innocent of how close we'd come to losing this. The next time I went to town, Jacob mentioned his niece. "Sarah's coming to live with me," he said while measuring out cornmeal. "Her parents died of influenza last month. She's 12. I'm her only family." "I'm sorry for your loss," I said, meaning it. "I don't know how to raise a girl." He said it simply, not asking for sympathy, just stating fact. Don't know what girls need, what they want. I can provide for her, food, shelter, schooling. But the rest? He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. I thought of my daughter, who I was teaching to sew, to cook, to manage a household. All the small skills that turned a child into a woman capable of surviving whatever life threw at her. Girls need what boys need, I said. Someone to notice them. Someone to teach them they're worth noticing. Jacob looked at me then, really looked, and something passed between us. Understanding. Recognition. The acknowledgement of shared loneliness. "She arrives next week," he said. I nodded and took my parcels, but walking home, mud sucking at my boots, I thought. A man who doesn't know how to raise a daughter. A woman who doesn't remember how to trust. Maybe we're both planting seeds and hoping something grows. The wheat stood taller every day, reaching for sunlight. I'd done my part, planted straight, watered when I could, pulled weeds. Now it was between the wheat and God. I'd learned to trust growing things more than I trusted people. But when I saw Jacob's lamp that night from my cabin window, I didn't look away. Sarah arrived on a Tuesday, all dark braids and serious eyes, and a dress 2 sizes too small. Jacob brought her to the mercantile, looking lost, and she looked more lost. And I happened to be there buying flour. "Martha," Jacob said, "this is Sarah. Sarah, this is Mrs. Thompson." "Martha," I corrected, and smiled at the girl. She didn't smile back, but her eyes assessed me. Smart eyes. Careful eyes. Eyes that had learned not to trust easily. I knew those eyes. I'd seen them in my mirror. Jacob cleared his throat. "I was thinking, Sarah needs some skills I can't teach. Sewing, mostly. Mending. She's got no one to show her how." He paused. "I could pay you. Or trade goods. If you'd be willing." Payment, not charity. Not asking me to do him a favor, but offering me work. Income. Respect. I looked at Sarah, saw her chin lifted in unconscious pride, saw her hands twisting in her too small skirt. "Thursday afternoons," I said. "Bring her to my place, 2 hours. "What's fair payment?" Jacob asked. "We'll figure it out," I said, and left before he could argue. Thursday, Sarah arrived with Jacob, who carried a box of fabric scraps and thread and needles, more than she'd need, enough for me to keep. I didn't comment, just showed Sarah where to sit at my table and set out the materials. "Have you sewn before?" I asked. "A little. Mama tried to teach me, but," her voice cracked, "she got sick before I learned much." "Then we'll start simple," I said, and showed her how to thread a needle, how to tie a knot, how to make a basic running stitch. Her hands were clumsy at first, all thumbs and frustration. I remembered that frustration, wanting to do something well, having the vision but not the skill. I guided her fingers, showed her how the needle follows the thread, how patience makes the stitch even. We worked in silence mostly, the kind of comfortable quiet that settles over shared task. Jacob sat in my only chair, watching, occasionally getting up to help my youngest son with building blocks. "You're good at this," Sarah said after an hour, examining the seam I demonstrated. "Practice," I said, "just practice and patience." But hearing myself say it, I realized, what if I'm not just surviving? What if I'm someone who knows things worth knowing, worth teaching, worth valuing? The thought stunned me. I sat very still, needle poised above fabric. "Mrs. Thompson?" Sarah's voice. "Martha, are you all right?" "Yes," I said, and meant it. "Yes, I'm fine." When they left, Jacob pressed coins into my hand, more than the lesson was worth, less than he probably wanted to give. "Same time next week?" he asked. "Same time," I agreed. That night, by lamplight, I looked at my hands, scarred, capable. Hands that knew how to create, not just endure. Sarah had looked at me like I knew secrets. And maybe I did. Maybe I'd been so busy surviving, I'd forgotten I also knew how to make things beautiful. The wheat in my field grew taller. The teaching sessions became routine, Thursday afternoons. Sarah's progress measured in straighter seams and growing confidence. Jacob brought her, stayed, drank coffee I made, talked about small things while we worked. I grew used to his presence in my home, grew used to the sound of his voice, the way he watched Sarah learn with something like pride, the way he looked at me sometimes when he thought I wasn't noticing. I was noticing. God help me. I was noticing everything. June heat turned the prairie into a furnace. The wheat stood tall now, golden green, heavy with promise. I walked through it in early morning, running my hands over the stalks, calculating in my head. If the wheat yielded well, if prices held, if no hail or locusts or drought destroyed it, I could pay the bank, could clear the debt, could prove I wasn't just the widow who couldn't make the land pay, could repay Jacob. That thought should have brought relief. Instead, it brought panic. What happens when I owe him nothing? When the debt is cleared and there's no more reason for damaged fabric or overstocked food or Thursday afternoon lessons. When I'm just a woman who once needed help and doesn't anymore. I tried to push the thoughts away, focused on the wheat, on my children, on mending shirts and cooking meals and all the small tasks that filled days. But Thursday came, and when Jacob brought Sarah, I found myself watching him differently, noticing the gray in his hair, the way his hands were gentle with my daughter when she showed him the stitching she'd learned, the way he never sat in my husband's chair. Had I told him not to? Or had he just known? "The wheat looks good," he said while Sarah practiced hemming. "If it holds," I said. "If we don't get hail." "You'll harvest well," he said with certainty I didn't feel. "And then I can pay you back," I said before I could stop myself. "For everything, for all the—" "No need," he interrupted. "Not sharp, but final. Teaching Sarah is payment enough, more than enough." I wanted to argue, wanted to insist, wanted to establish clean lines between us. Debt paid, accounts settled, no lingering obligation. But Sarah looked up from her hemming and said, "You're a good teacher, Martha. Uncle Jacob says he doesn't know what we'd do without you." The we, as if I was already part of their lives, their small family of two. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lay listening to summer insects and my children's breathing and the sound of wind in the wheat. Why does owing him money feel safer than not owing him anything? What am I really afraid of losing? Thunder rumbled in the distance. I got up, went to the window, watched lightning fork across the horizon. The wheat bent in the wind, resilient, strong. "Please," I prayed, "please let it survive." I was praying for the wheat, but I was also praying not to lose the teaching sessions, the Thursday afternoons, the quiet man who looked at me like I mattered. The storm passed without hail, but the fear didn't pass. It settled into my bones and made everything complicated. The storm had missed us. Barely. Other homesteads hadn't been so lucky. I heard about damaged crops, ruined harvests, families packing up and heading back east. The wheat had survived, but I hadn't. Something in me had cracked during that long night of watching storms, and now everything that poured out was doubt. Is he kind to everyone? Is this how he treats all the widows, all the poor families? Am I special or just convenient? The woman close enough to teach his niece, pathetic enough to accept charity dressed as commerce. I tried to stop the thoughts, couldn't. Thursday came. Sarah arrived full of questions about making a dress from the blue fabric Jacob had given me months ago. We spread it out on my table, and I showed her how to measure, how to cut pattern pieces from newspaper first. "Why don't you ever make anything pretty for yourself?" Sarah asked, innocent, curious. The question hit like a fist. I looked down at my dress, gray, worn, mended in so many places it was more mending than original fabric. When had I last made something new for myself? When had I last thought I deserved something new? "I make what's needed," I said, voice tight. "But don't you need pretty things too?" Sarah persisted. "Uncle Jacob says beautiful things aren't just decoration, they're proof we're still human." I couldn't answer, couldn't speak past the tightness in my throat. Jacob, sitting in the corner with my youngest, looked up. Our eyes met. He saw my face, saw something break in it. "Sarah," he said gently, "why don't you take the children outside, show them that cat's nest in the barn?" When they were gone, silence stretched between us like the prairie, wide, empty, dangerous to cross. "Martha," he said. "Don't." My voice came out sharp. "Don't be kind to me right now. I can't." "Can't what?" "Trust it." The words burst out. "Can't trust that this is real. That I'm not just another widow you felt sorry for. That when the debt is paid, you won't—" "Won't what?" He stood, took a step closer. "Won't keep coming to Thursday lessons? Won't keep watching to make sure you're all right. Won't keep hoping you'll realize I'm not doing this out of pity. I stared at him. You think I give damaged fabric to every woman in town? His voice was quiet, intense. You think I stay for coffee? Let my niece get attached? Watch your hands create beautiful things and don't see you? I don't know what you see, I whispered. I don't know what I am anymore except surviving, except poor, except brave, he said. Strong, capable, worth knowing. The words broke something in me. I sat down hard, put my face in my hands. I'm scared, I said to the floor. I'm scared of hoping and being wrong. Of letting myself believe and then what? Then I leave? Then I stop caring? He crouched in front of me, so I had to look at him. Martha, I'm not going anywhere. Whether you owe me money or not, whether you need help or not, I'm here because I choose to be. But how could I believe that? How could I trust that I was worth choosing? That night, alone, I thought, I'll harvest. I'll repay every cent. And then I'll know. If he still looks at me the same way when I owe him nothing, maybe then I can let myself hope. But I can't let myself hope yet. Hope is dangerous. Hope is a crop you plant in spring that dies in summer heat. Hope is what killed my husband. Hope that the land would provide. That hard work guaranteed reward. That wanting something badly enough made it real. I couldn't afford hope. I could only afford caution. Harvest came. The wheat had survived everything, storms, drought, insects, and stood tall and golden under August's sun. I hired hands with money I didn't have yet, money I'd have after the wheat sold. My children worked beside me, and Jacob showed up unasked with Sarah, both of them ready to help. You don't have to, I said. I know, Jacob replied, and picked up a sickle. We worked until our hands bled, until the sun set red and angry, until every stalk was cut and bundled and loaded into wagons. The yield was good, better than good. Enough to pay the bank, enough to pay Jacob, enough to see us through winter with money left over. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. 2 days later, the wheat sold. I took the money to the bank first, watched the clerk mark paid in full across my account. The relief should have been overwhelming. It wasn't. Then I went to the mercantile, late afternoon. After most customers had left, Jacob was restocking shelves. He turned when the bell rang, smiled when he saw me. Martha. I need to settle accounts, I said. Too formal, too stiff. I set the money on the counter. Enough to cover every bolt of fabric, every tin of food, every small kindness disguised as commerce. Jacob looked at the money, looked at me, didn't touch it. No, he said. Jacob. No. Firm now. Teaching Sarah is payment, more than payment. She can sew now, can mend, can create. You gave her that. It's not equal. You've given me so much more. Have I? He came around the counter, stood close enough I could see gold flecks in his brown eyes. You've given Sarah a skill she'll use her whole life. You've given her patience, attention, someone who sees her. You've given me... He stopped, started again. You've given me Thursday afternoons I look forward to all week. You've given me coffee that tastes better in your kitchen than anywhere else. You've given me a reason to notice that summer light slants differently through your windows. That your daughter has your stubborn chin. That your hands create beautiful things even when you think no one's watching. My heart was beating too hard. I don't want your money, Martha, he said quietly. I want something else entirely. What? I whispered. A partnership. He took a breath. Not because you need saving. You've proven you can save yourself.
Not because you owe me, you don't owe me anything, but because I've seen what you're capable of. How you raise children alone, coax life from hard ground, teach with patience I don't possess. Because I'm lonely in that house behind the mercantile, and I think maybe you're lonely too. This was it, the choice. Accept this as rescue and reject it. Protect myself from disappointment, or recognize it as genuine respect and choose partnership over safety. I thought of the flour sack doll dress I'd made for Sarah last week. Something humble, utilitarian, designed to be discarded, transformed through care into something treasured. Is choosing to be chosen weakness? Or is refusing connection because I'm afraid? Is that the real weakness? I'm terrified, I said, honest. I'm terrified of hoping and being wrong. What if you hoped and were right? He asked. I looked at my hands, scarred, capable, worthy of being held. Looked at Jacob's hands, equally scarred, equally capable, reaching for mine. Yes, I said, voice steady. Yes, but on one condition. He waited. I make my own wedding dress, I said. From flour sacks, if that's what I have. Because I'm not ashamed of what kept us alive. Because I want to remember that we survived, that I survived. That my worth isn't measured in bank accounts or perfect dresses, but in this. In choosing. In being brave enough to say yes. Jacob's smile broke across his face like sunrise. Flour sacks, he said. I wouldn't have it any other way. He picked up my hands, scarred, rope-burned, cracked, and held them like they were precious. And maybe, finally, I let myself believe they were. September morning, clear and gold as honey. I stood in my bedroom wearing a dress I'd made from flour sacks and blue cotton. I'd bleached the sacks until the logos faded, used the bluish trim at collar and cuffs, sewn lace from scraps at the hem. It wasn't fancy, wasn't silk or satin or anything a woman might find in a catalog. But it was mine, made by my hands, from materials that had fed my children, clothed them, kept us alive when nothing else would. My daughter fastened the buttons at my back, her small fingers deaf now from weeks of practice. You look beautiful, Mama, she whispered. I looked at myself in the cracked mirror. A woman of 28 who'd survived a husband's death, near poverty, shame, loneliness. A woman with scars on her hands and strength in her spine. I looked beautiful because I'd survived, because I'd chosen to keep going when it would have been easier to give up, because I'd learned my worth wasn't measured in gold or land or what I owned, but in who I was when everything was stripped away. The ceremony was simple. Our community gathered at the small church, not many. We'd never been the kind of people others noticed much. But they came. Neighbors, townspeople, even Mrs. Henderson, who cried into her handkerchief. Jacob stood at the front in his good suit, Sarah beside him in the blue dress I'd taught her to make. My children stood beside me. We were already a family before the vows. This just made it official. When Jacob took my hands, I didn't hide them, didn't pull away or feel shame at their roughness. I see you, he said quietly, not part of the vows but needed anyway. I've always seen you. I know, I said, and meant it. I know that now. After, there was food, bread Sarah and I had baked together, roast someone donated, pies from women who'd finally stopped looking at me with pity and started looking with something like respect. We ate and laughed and let ourselves be happy. My children played with other children, their flour sack shirts clean but unremarkable now, just clothes, not markers of poverty. That evening, standing in the doorway of Jacob's house that was now also mine, watching my children and Sarah chase lightning bugs in the yard, I thought about everything that had brought me here. The death that had broken me, the debt that had shamed me, the flour sacks I'd sewn into shirts and finally into a wedding dress, the quiet man who'd seen worth where I'd seen only failure. I learned what wealth means when you've lost everything. It means knowing what you'd fight to keep.
Jacob came up behind me, slipped his arms around my waist, rested his chin on my shoulder. "Happy?" he asked. I looked at my hands, his hands covering them, both sets scarred and capable and worthy. "Yes," I said. And I was. Finally. Impossibly. Completely. Not because someone had rescued me, because I'd rescued myself, then chosen to let someone stand beside me. Because flour sacks had become a wedding dress, and poverty had become proof of survival, and loneliness had become the kind of connection that grows deeper for being earned. That's what I'd fight to keep. These hands, this choice, this man who saw flour sacks and imagined lace.